Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight we're going to be talking about the beast of the land between the lakes. Some of y'all may have heard of this creature, and some of you might not. I had never heard of it until recently when I received an email from Lowell John Howard. He's the one that requested last week's show, and he'd also suggested this one. So here it is. But first, my latest book, Paranormal Laredo, will be out soon. I'm finishing it up so I can take it to Edinburgh Ufo Conference, August 13th, 14th, and 15th. Check out the info at facebook.com/Edinburgh UFO. I hope to see you there. It's quite a conference. It's well worth going. The Organic Man Coffee Trike is doing online coffee sales. You can find them on Facebook at Organic Man Coffee Trike, or if you'd like to place an order, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. You can get a great bag of Trike Blend, which is Julio's own roasted coffee. You might like to check out the Guatemalan or the Brazilian. Great coffee. Last week I talked about Captain Jack Hinson, the one-man wrecking crew of the Civil War. He took out well over 100 Union officers and kept parts of 9 regiments, an amphibious task force of specially built Navy boats, busy trying to find him. This kept much-needed assets away from the front line. Jack had an antebellum plantation in Stewart County, Tennessee. For the one or two of y'all that don't know this, antebellum means before the Civil War. Postbellum means after the Civil War. It's like AM and PM. Ante-meridian and post-meridian. Jack's plantation was burned to the ground by the Union. He did rebuild after the war, but little remains of his home today. His land sat in an area known as the land between the rivers. The Tennessee River was prone to flooding, as are all rivers. In 1933, the Tennessee Valley Authority was established to build dams on the rivers of Tennessee to control flooding, improve river navigation, and create electricity. The dams backed up the rivers, turning them into lakes. The dam on the Tennessee River was all the way down in the southern end of Tennessee, but it backed the river up all the way into Kentucky. The land between the rivers became the land between the lakes. As part of America's great outdoors since 1963, land between the Lakes National Recreation Management Area is over 170,000 acres of forest, wetland, and open lands on a peninsula between the Kentucky and the Barkley Lakes in western Kentucky and northern Tennessee. About 2/3 of the land is in Kentucky and 1/3 in Tennessee. This family-friendly recreation area offers one of the largest blocks of undeveloped forest in the eastern United States. With 300 miles of natural shoreline, lake access provides idyllic settings for camping, picnicking, hiking, fishing, boating, wildlife viewing and water sports. Licensed hunts for deer, turkey, squirrel, and other small game occur throughout the year. Land Between the Lakes recreation area draws visitors from around the world who want to see nature, escape from the day-to-day grind. People also enjoy the authentic experience provided by Woodland Nature Station, Elk and Bison Prairie, Home Place 1850s Working Farm, Golden Pond Planetarium and Observatory. These dispersed conservation education areas can be found throughout the Land Between the Lakes. They maintain over 500 miles of trails for hiking, biking, off-road riding, and horseback. A horse camp stays open year-round for all campers. Scenic drives provide optimum wildlife viewing areas in the comfort of your car. And now for a word of caution for those of you who aren't familiar with being in the wild. There is a reason they call them wild animals. They're not tame. I hear all the time about people approaching animals in parks only to be surprised when the animal attacks them. People complain about how the animals aren't very well trained. I worry about these folks, how they manage to stay alive without somebody there to hold their hand. The bear that holds the highest number of attacks is the polar bear. And weirdly enough, it's because of those Coke commercials showing friendly bears drinking soda. People think these white animals are tame. More people get killed by polar bears than all the other bears. And there is also a reason why zoos have bars. They're not just there to keep the animals in. They're to keep people away from the dangerous parts of the bears, which is the whole bear. Yet, every year, you'll hear about people slipping over the rail, getting right up against the bars so they can pet the bears. My wife and I drove through one of those open-range zoos up in Oklahoma. We fed the giraffes and other herbivores. They would come right up to the truck window, and we had a bag of food supplied by the zoo. We also saw carnivores. We didn't feed them. We kept our windows up the whole time we were in the dangerous animal part of the zoo. We know the difference between animals you can touch and animals you keep your arms and legs away from. If you are in an area where there are animals and you don't know what to do around them, ask the park officials. They will tell you how to view the wildlife and come away with fantastic photos and still maintain all your body parts. Remember, if it's a wild animal, stay away from it. Back to the land between the rivers, or land between the lakes. Innovative resource management draws 240 different species of birds each year. There's a festival celebrates the hummingbird migration in August, and boats take visitors in search of eagles in the winter months. I would love to head up there and spend a few days and nights seeing the sights and exploring the trails. My wife would love the place as well, right up until she found out the place has another creature people have seen. The beast of the land between the lakes is said to resemble a gigantic half-man, half-wolf that walks on two legs. It has 5-fingered human-looking hands that are ending in vicious-looking claws. The creature is said to stand over 7 feet tall, with massive crushing jaws and glowing red eyes. This description sounds a lot like the Dogman sightings as well. There are several legends attached to the beast. One story begins with a Native American culture with the ability to shapeshift. The Cherokee Indians have a rich and deep relationship with nature, and they tell stories about people who have witnessed a Sasquatch, a Dogman, and sometimes something that sounds like a werewolf. Many bizarre creatures spread out over a long time. Some of the creatures would be seen sitting, digging for roots, and eating other greenery. Others are seen carrying dead animals back to their lair for dinner. Native Americans have come to understand that the diet of this hairy being is as wide and varied as our own. In fact, the Indian tribes have profound respect for the wild man of the woods, and they believe the creature to have supernatural abilities. What would a Sasquatch or Dogman or a werewolf eat? Anything or anyone they wanted. A Sasquatch are not herbivores. They've been seen with all manner of food. The difference between a Sasquatch and a Dogman is the muzzle and the backwards bending legs. A dog's legs don't really bend backwards. It has knees just like us, only they're higher up the leg. The part folks think of as being the knee is known as the hock. It is the equivalent of our ankle. Dogs walk on their toes. According to the native Shawnee tribe, this abomination was the spirit of a powerful shape-shifting shaman. Outsiders were frequently warned away from the area. When the settlers began to come to the region, they're said to have been plagued by some large predator which lurked in the shadows, killing and maiming their livestock. Witnesses saying the culprit was a hairy, wolf-like beast that walked on 2 legs, and it would unleash a blood-curdling howl and shrieking at night. The Hillbilly Beast quietly stalks and roams the back hills of eastern Kentucky near the Ohio River. This large and intimidating creature has called this land home long before settlers moved into the neighborhood. As the years passed by, turning years into centuries, the human population grew throughout the United States. This caused people to live in areas where the man-beast lived. Humans continually move farther out into virgin and unspoiled territory. Thus, they're coming face to face with other creatures that call this land their home. There are people out there who think the entire country is populated by man. These are the folks who never get out of the city. These are also the folks trying to feed the bears at the zoo by hand. Documented reports of these human man-beast run-ins have been made to the authorities by many people over the years. There are untold hundreds of sightings that go unreported due to people not wanting to have the notoriety or just not thinking it was something to talk about. Seeing a beast that stands 8 to 10 feet tall is something I would want to talk about, but some folks consider this to be between them and the creature. It's almost as if encountering something like that is considered almost a spiritual activity. Weighing in at an estimated 800 pounds, this creature is usually very dark in appearance, with hair covering its entire body. The face looks incredibly human, with an extraordinarily intelligent look in its eyes. When the creature swings his head around and catches you observing it. Witnesses have said the eyes appear almost black in the daylight, and they glow with an eerie yellow color when evening descends. The creature has no neck, so in order to turn its head, the creature will turn its upper body as well. It is very vocal at times, using a broad range of vocalizations to communicate. The territorial howl that people have come to associate with him is quite loud in nature, and those who have heard it say the hair rises up on their arms during its orations. People who have discovered that they were physically close to him reported hearing the creature make low, guttural, breathy grunting sounds. One night, while listening to Art Bell, who was talking to some Bigfoot researchers, they began playing audio recordings. Most just sounded like animalistic screams. Then they played a few that caused my dog to turn, run, and hide under the desk. The recording sounded pretty much the same, but my dog could tell there was something scary making some of those sounds. The Hillbilly Beast in every way matches the descriptions of Bigfoot or Sasquatch found throughout our planet. What has been described as Bigfoot has been seen and documented on every continent in the entire world. The Hillbilly Beast has shown the same behavior as his faraway cousins. If he considers you to be trespassing in his territory, you can expect to be greeted with rocks of every size flying out of the tree line in your direction. Consider this to be your invitation to leave right away. People will tell you no one has ever been killed by a Bigfoot. Then again, there have been thousands of unexplained disappearances over the years from out-of-the-way places. It's a bad idea to assume we know what a Bigfoot or Sasquatch might do if it catches a person in the middle of nowhere and it's dinner time. People who live in the area of a Bigfoot report the sound of loud banging as if tree limbs are hitting the trunks of trees. I know some researchers that claim Bigfoot is communicating using tree knocks, while I know others who say this can't be done since Bigfoot doesn't have an opposable thumb, so it can't hold a limb like a human. The TV show Monster Quest investigated the Hillbilly Beast on one of their shows. They trekked down into Kentucky wilderness looking for the creature. While exploring some of the hot spots, the team is surprised when they hear the crack of tree limbs and the rocks that are hurled in their direction during their walk along the river. Recording devices set up by the investigative crew do a remarkable job of picking up animal sounds in the distance, some of which may belong to the Hillbilly Beast. Out of the array of noises sent in for verification by specialists, 20 to 30 of the vocals could not be identified as belonging to any known animal. A tooth was found during the show, and it was given to the investigators. They photographed it, and they used some really high-definition film. They weren't given the tooth itself. It's the kind of thing that when you've got it in your possession, you don't just hand it over to a film crew. You'll probably never see it again. The photo was sent off to an expert who is unable to identify which animal the tooth might have come from. In the show, they recreate a witness's story. There's a guy named Gainyard who tells how him and his friend drove out to look at a new boat ramp which was put in out in the woods. They looked over the new ramp and then they tried to drive out. The van they're in got stuck in a muddy spot, so the friend volunteered to walk into town to get help. Gainyard stayed in the van. As he sat there, the van was attacked by some huge hair-covered creature. The man was convinced he was about to die as the creature shook the van back and forth. The thing must have made its point because it left the van alone after its attack. Just as a humorous thought, maybe it was trying to help get the van unstuck. Yeah, right. Put yourself in the witness's place. There's a huge hair-covered creature, and it's trying to kill you. Does it have a flat face, or does it look more like the face of a dog? Is there a muzzle or not? If you're looking straight at the face, it would be difficult to tell the difference. Seeing it through the windows, you wouldn't be able to see the legs to know whether they bent like a dog's or like a wolf. Seeing something and being able to describe it to a T is difficult, even when you're not scared to death. Add in some panic, and you're going to miss some details. Saying the land between the lakes over and over is a bit much, so I'll just go with the initials LBL. The origins of the creature of the LBL could be from some of the stories going around from the 1800s. One of them centers around a man who settled in the LBL sometime in the 1800s. He claimed he suffered from nighttime sickness, which would cause him to fly into a rage that made him dangerous to be around. The man claimed it was passed down through his bloodline. Stories abound around him and his eventual descendants, all of which lived in the LBL area sometime up until the 1900s. The rages were so profound and so destructive, the man and his descendants were described as being like wild animals. They would become berserk, like a berserker of the Norwegian fame. This is from the pre-medieval and the medieval Norse and the Germanic history and folklore. A berserker was a member of an unruly warrior gang that worshipped Odin, the supreme Norse deity, and they attached themselves to royalty and noble courts as bodyguards and shock troops. The berserkers' savagery in battle and their animal skin attire contributed to the development of the werewolf legends in Europe. The berserkers were in the habit of raping and murdering at will in their host communities, thus going berserk. And in the Norse sagas, they were often portrayed as villains. In some old Norse poems, of which date to the 9th century, berserkers are recorded as the household guard of Norway's king. Another possible origin of the LBL creature comes from the French traders. They spoke of legends about the Loup-Garou, a person cursed to change into a beast by a witch or divine punishment for some crime. The poor soul would then be overcome with animalistic rage and a craving for raw meat. The traders feared the creature not just because of its violent nature, but because the curse could be spread to those who survived an attack. The legend of the Loup-Garou sounds a lot like the stories of the Wendigo. The Wendigo will eat other humans even when there's plenty of food to go around. Accounts of the creature from the early days of American expansion into Kentucky tell of hunters disappearing in the woods and of strange, unnatural howls that echoed throughout the forests at night. At this time, bison still roamed wild in Kentucky, and hunters would sometimes encounter mutilated carcasses of these massive animals, lying half-eaten in deep grass. It looked as if their throats had been ripped open with massive claws. Even now, with the effort to restore the bison to Kentucky, rangers and herd managers occasionally find calves missing. After one of the young goes missing, the herd is reputedly spooked for days, sticking together in the close formation that the animals use to protect themselves from predators. Now, the story earlier about the Kentucky hillbilly Bigfoot is from eastern Kentucky, and the land between the lakes is in western Kentucky. It's only 200 miles from one to the other. Over the years, a creature could wander this far with little difficulty, especially seeing as southern Kentucky and northern Tennessee have vast stretches of wilderness areas. There have been several reports of close encounters with the creature in modern times. One of the most frightening of these happened to a group of Murray State University students who were camping in the LBL area in 1973. A group of young men were enjoying the woods on a warm spring weekend, sitting around a fire that they had built next to their VW microbus. They were just generally having a good time. I'm sure somebody brought some marijuana to smoke. I'm sure somebody brought some beer to drink. That's what kids did back then. As the evening began drawing on, one of the students had to go into the woods for the call of nature. And when nature calls, you have to go. When he returned to the campsite, he told his friends that he felt like something was watching him and that he heard something sniffling around in the woods. His friends said that he just heard a wild hog or some other animal. The student said he'd never heard anything like it before, and he grew increasingly nervous as the darkness set in. As the night grew dark, the group started to hear the shuffling sound of something large moving in the fallen leaves. It seemed to be circling their campsite, moving fairly fast. The boys began to become anxious. They tried using their flashlights to see into the woods in the direction of the footsteps, but they couldn't see anything. The leaves would have blocked the light, and the shadows would have been too hard to see into. Then the howling began. They say it sounded like a wild, insane howling, like a wolf, only much louder, with a sound that no wolf could possibly have made. It was unnatural and blood-curdling. It made the howling sound almost like mocking laughter. It seemed to come from everywhere around them, first on one side of the circle of light, then from the other side. Soon the terrified campers began to catch glimpses of a pair of glowing red eyes as they ran past in the dark. I would have thought it was more than one creature, since they heard it from all around the camp. I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure what time frame was between each of the howls. The terrified boys retreated into the Volkswagen bus, and they decided the better part of valor was knowing when to run. They did not want to stick around and get a better view, running the risk of seeing something they would regret encountering. Getting the VW bus going, they tore down the road, getting to some place where they might be safe. As they were driving away, one of the group spotted something on the road behind them. They were being chased by a massive shadowy figure that was running on two legs, but it looked like a wolf. It was racing along behind them, barely visible in the bus's taillights. As the bus slowed in order to take a corner, they felt something slam into the rear of the vehicle. The driver gave it the gas, only to feel as if the vehicle was now being held in place. The microbus engine was revving and the tires were spinning, but they were not going anywhere, and the creature was now right behind them. It seemed as if the thing was holding the Volkswagen in place. Even a VW microbus has some power, and soon the spinning tires grabbed the road and the bus shot away from the creature. Giving it everything the engine could take, they tore out of the forest and didn't stop until they were back on the Murray State campus. Back on campus, they found 4 deep gashes, like claw marks, torn into the metal of the engine compartment cover at the back of the bus. Now, I would think that the damage was actually to the rear door. The engine compartment is very low. The creature would have to have bent way down to get a hold of the engine door. In case you're confused, the VW microbus had the engine in the rear. It had a door that opened straight up. Above this door was a rear door for access into the compartment above the engine. These doors were metal, not plastic. For a creature to punch its claws through sheet metal would require enormous strength. This, combined with the creature being able to hold the vehicle in place, makes me glad I never ran into it. I would have missed having my .41 Magnum, which I had given to my nephew for a wedding present. Yes, I give strange wedding presents, but oh well, that's me. With that, I am going to take a brief pause and play some commercials, drink some coffee. Don't go away, we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. Coffee, nectar of the gods. And at the Organic Man Coffee Trike, you'll find coffee made the right way, one delicious cup at a time. Stop on by 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. Makeup isn't something you want to just smear on and hope for the best. You might come out looking like Lon Chaney. Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and get a free makeover to see how makeup should be done. 956-723-3019. Did you go out UFO hunting and couldn't focus on the sky? Swing on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle Del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. Now, that's not a weather balloon, that's a flying saucer. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. Be sure and check out organicmancoffeetrike.shop if you'd like to order some coffee. The sightings of the monster were common among people living in the area around the LBL. Some of them have told stories that either their grandfathers told them, sometimes it was from their fathers and mothers. Some of these stories are from the actual witnesses. They told stories of finding livestock slaughtered, ripped to pieces, and chewed on. Cows and pigs with their legs dismembered, as if pulled from the sockets. Even a few horses had met their end with savage attacks upon their bodies. A few of the storytellers described what they saw at different times when they caught glimpses of a figure by peeking out the curtains of the window late at night or when they had a chance encounter outside. If you're sitting in your home and you hear strange sounds outside, you would first want to peek out a window. You don't go running outside. First, you want to find out if you need a gun or not, or if it's just a wild cat running around outside looking for his girlfriend. One man said he was out working in the yard when he saw the beast as it jumped out of one of the horse stalls. He was almost next to the stall and the creature landed close to him. The beast stopped right in front of him, arms spread out like it was getting ready to grab him. It let out a howl, and then it sprang past him and into the dusky shadows of the sunset. This particular man said he was so frightened he had to go back inside and change his overalls. Another man said he never actually saw the creature, but he would hear its baleful wail frequently at night. Not like a regular wolf or coyote. No, he said it was more deep, longer, stronger sounding than what would come from any animal he had ever heard. Another old-timer said his wife had seen it trying to get into the chicken coop, but it had given up after getting tangled in the chicken wire. They all had tales of someone's hound dog getting killed, ripped apart limb from limb. Someone's pig or cow or chickens were being eaten. The mysterious footprints left in the mud and the stench it left behind were also relevant. Another widely circulated story tells of the discovery of a bloody scene inside a motorhome of a family camping in the area in the 1980s. Police are said to have found the horribly mutilated bodies of a visiting family laying in their blood-soaked motorhome. The bodies are all said to have been distinctively massive claw marks. This incident was supposedly covered up by the authorities so as to not damage the tourist industry in the then economically fragile region. Would anybody cover up something like this just for economic reasons? You bet they would. The National Park Service, as well as every state park service, doesn't publish any records of deaths or disappearances inside the parks. Just ask David Paulides about his research into missing people. David has written several books about folks going missing in our parks. You can get them in paperback, but not Kindle. Just look for Missing 411 and see if you still want to go camping. Evidence for and encounters with the beast of the LBL continue to this day. I had thought about calling it the BLBL, but that's just too many letters, and it sounds hokey. Experienced hunters shy away from the area, saying this is not a good place for hunting. They said they didn't feel comfortable while there. These sportsmen that are new enough to the area will scoff at these legends. Then they often come home with tales of feeling as if they were being stalked while they were in the woods. Deep holes like nests are often found dug in the ground of the woods with tufts of long, coarsely textured grayish-brown fur found in them. No one ever thought to take a sample since this was before all the Bigfoot shows were on TV. Rangers in the park are routinely asked what the strange howl was that a camper heard during the night. One of the more interesting reports of supernatural activity comes from a witness who said they had seen a creature that looked like the beast step out of a portal. The air seemed to have begun swirling around, and it looked like what a pixelated photo would look. The witness was impressed enough by his sighting to grab a set of binoculars and sit there watching the creature. It moved about for a bit, and then it stepped back through the portal. After having this bizarre sighting, the witness returned to the observation spot to watch that same area and try to see the beast again. It popped in and out of sight a few times after his first time seeing it. This is not the only time something like this has been reported. When George Knapp was researching the Skinwalker Ranch back in 2004, he witnessed a strange-looking creature come out of what looked like a portal. It was a huge hair-covered beast that just appeared out of nowhere. The creature was described as being a Bigfoot, since few people had been talking about Dogman or werewolf sightings at the time. In his book, George Knapp talks about watching this weird apparition that walked around the ranch for a bit before vanishing back into the portal. Another account related by a frequent blogger on this phenomena named Jan Thompson occurred to her and her cousin Joe in the summer of 1978. Joe was an avid dirt biker. He loved to go tearing about the forest trails in the LBL area. On one trail ride, he was out riding while his cousin Jan and her other cousin sat outside. At some point, they said, as they sat there talking, they could hear the sound of the dirt bike as it made its way through the woods. Suddenly, the engine sounded as if the rider was gunning the engine, which is very dangerous in these windy trails. They could hear the bike engine as it was flying through the trees, coming back towards them. Joe came busting from the trees, making a frantic beeline straight towards the house. He came skidding wildly to a halt. The two girls could see Joe was visibly shaken. He looked white as a sheet, and he kept looking over his shoulder as if something was following him. The two wanted to know what was wrong, but it took Joe a few minutes before he could even speak. He just watched the wood line in the direction he had come from. Jan said, "We followed his gaze, not understanding what this escapade was all about. In silence, we watched with him for about 30 seconds. Then the dogs started barking, growling, and then whining, trying to get out of the pen and in a frantic panic of digging and gnawing at the fence." Jan then said that Joe said, "It grabbed me. Look at my leg." He was so shook up he almost yelled this statement. We looked down at his Levi's and saw scratch marks going across his right thigh. Scratches that tore through the tough denim and left small bloody marks on his skin. The marks were like a bear's claw rake, not those caused by branches or sticky bushes, but a definite wide pattern of a paw print. "It walked on two legs," he yelled, as he was trying to tell his story in between huge gulps of air. He was frightened beyond belief, and the bits of pieces of what he was striving with extreme effort to tell was coming out in loud syllables that filled us with some form of dread. "It was following me through the woods, along the path, from the old sawmill. Hairy. It was so hairy, and its snout was long. It walked on two legs. It ran on two legs." His voice was sputtering, slowing. His eyes were still wide, and I could see the pulse of his heartbeat throbbing under the skin of his temples. Jan continued her story by saying, as they stood there listening to Joe tell his story, the air was pierced by a loud howl. It sounded like a wolf's howl, only 10 times louder and a lot meaner. The howl had a frightening effect on all three of the teenagers. The dogs were all shaking and cowering in fear and staring expectantly at the dim forest. Out of the trees crept a creature, the likes of which none of them had ever seen before. It was described as being huge, hairy, and walking on two legs. The snout was long, and the witness was very specific that it was much different in appearance than any Bigfoot. When the security light of the driveway turned on, the startled creature was illuminated, and with the bright light, the creature went from being just a huge shadow into being a werewolf-looking monster standing at the end of the driveway. It was way too close for comfort. Seeing a werewolf from 10 miles away with binoculars would still be too close, but this thing was only about 40 feet away. The three teens turned and ran for the door to the house. Once inside, they locked the door and ran to the kitchen, where they grabbed some knives, hoping to not need them. The three then ran to one of the bedrooms and hid beneath one of the beds. They could hear the monster as it crashed around outside the house. It managed to throw something and break one of the second-floor windows. The dogs were going crazy, barking and yapping as the creature moved around just on the other side of their fence. The three kids must have thought they were going to die, and in a very nasty and painful way. They lay there under the bed, praying and hoping the monster would go away. Without any warning, the sound of the beast stopped. The dogs were still barking, but not nearly as frantically. Listening closely, wondering why the sounds had changed, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. This would have been Jan's aunt returning from town. It was either the sight of the car coming or the beast had grown wary of its hunt. For whatever reason, the monster had left. Living near the LBL area and having such a life-altering encounter, Jan began looking into stories of similar encounters. As she found a story from the 1980s that made her sighting seem not quite so disturbing. In the early 1980s, the police were summoned to a campsite in the park. Park rangers enforce park laws. The police are called any time there's something not covered in their rule book. The police found a scene right out of a horror movie. In a remote area of the park are some military-style bunkers. No one knows for sure if these are actual military structures built during World War II or some other cement buildings used for other purposes. Some folks had set up camp in the area. During the night, they were attacked by some kind of a monster. It looked as if they had been a young couple with a couple of small children. The report states there were 3 or 4 bodies. Either the report wasn't clear or the sight was that bad. The bodies were badly mutilated. Parts were missing. The police had to try rebuilding the bodies to see how many there were. It was an icky mess. There were bite marks on the remains. The authorities couldn't match the bites and the teeth marks to any known animal. This did not look like any bear attack. There were no wolves in the area at the time. Wolves have been gone from the state since the mid-1800s. The police began searching the area and they stumbled upon one more body. It was high up in a tree. It looked as if some beast had carried the body up to the tree and then sat on one of the limbs to have dinner. The bark of the tree had some odd-looking gray and brown hair sticking to it. The bodies were all taken into town in order to forensically study them and try to figure out who or what had done the killing. Samples of the hair and saliva taken from the scene were sent in for definitive answers as to what had killed these people. The saliva and hair came back as being wolf-like, but not wolf. In an effort to close the case, authorities said the family was attacked by coyotes. The coyotes don't climb trees. There have been photos taken of coyotes up in trees eating fruit. It would be almost impossible for them to carry a body up into a tree. A pack of coyotes would simply devour it right there on the ground. This might have been a retelling of the earlier story where the campers were attacked. One story, they were in a tent. the other, it was an RV. Since the Park Service is in no hurry to pass on these stories, it's hard to sort them all out. Those who claim this never happened will be surprised to find out it was verified by a retired Kentucky State Trooper. A man who lived in the LBL area was startled by his dog barking at the door flap. The flap was there so the dog could come and go as it wished. The man looked at the door and saw a huge, hairy creature trying to squeeze through the door. The door was beginning to creak as if it was about to break. In desperation, the man began throwing things at the head of the beast until it finally left. He said it looked like the head of a wolf, only way too big. In the LBL area is a place called the Vampire Hotel. This was an abandoned structure near the Kentucky Lake. The stone and concrete structure was partially torn down in the 1960s with the creation of the LBL area, but parts of it did remain. It was one of just a handful of remaining structures. Throughout the 1990s, it became a popular hangout spot for kids and folks with odd intentions. People would go there to smoke dope, drink beer, and try to act mean and tough. The structure itself was a single-story home that belonged to Dorothy K. Keith. The stone and frame house was built sometime after the creation of Kentucky Lake and was used as a vacation home. The basement was set at such a location you could go through the garden in order to get to the basement, what we would call a split level. As far as records go, there were never any connections between the hotel and any beast sightings. Somebody at some time spray painted the name Vampire Hotel across the front. Roderick Justin Farrell used a structure in the LBL as his Vampire Hotel. Maybe he was the one that painted the name across the front of the building. He made world news when he was arrested after murdering the parents of his friend. He claimed that he was a vampire and the leader of a vampire clan. Farrell told people that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. The clan used the structure in the LBL and called it the Vampire Hotel. After the story broke, officials made every effort to make the place disappear. They closed the road, and the location is pretty much secret now. Some sources say that the building has been completely demolished. Others claim it's still there. There is a legend of sorts that says if you're out hiking late in the evening or after dark, and you see a group of white-tailed deer standing in your path, all looking at you, it is time to turn around and get out of there. These deer are supposed to be the spirits of some sort there to warn people that the beast is nearby. I found the story, but no explanation as to who or why the spirit deer are there. Nobody could say who had come up with the story. It sounds to me like an Indian legend, but, like I said, I couldn't find any more references to it. People have said they see red eyes looking at them from the woods. If they turn a light in the direction of the eyes, there is nothing there that could have belonged to them. The eyes look as if they are glowing from some internal source and not eyeshine. Some Bigfoot researchers say that Sasquatch have red eyeshine. Then others say they have green or yellow eyeshine. The Dogman is said to have yellow eyes. None of the eyeshine is none of the color of eyeshine has been proven. That's a hard statement to make. The folks saying this are going by what they have heard or seen, but they still need to find a body in order to see if Bigfoot actually has red or yellow or green eye shine, and whether the Dogman has green or yellow or red eye shine. The structure that causes glowing eyes in deer, dogs, cats, and other creatures is called tapetum lucidum. This is a layer of specially adapted cells behind the retina that reflect light. When light passes into the creature's eyes, it strikes the many rod receptors in the retina, helping it to identify the movement of potential predators or prey. It sounds to me that there is some kind of a wild creature hanging out in the land between the lakes area. Whether it lives there or just pops in on occasion looking for its next meal is open to debate. Do I want to go there and have a look? Oh, yes. I'd love to drive up there and see all the sights in the area. I like hiking. Would I want to spend the night? Only if I have my rifle, my shotgun, and my pistol, and a few friends carrying similar weaponry. Plus, an armored RV would be nice. Maybe one of those Unimog RVs that I've seen on TV. The ones that cost like $300,000. I checked David Paulides' map that shows clusters of missing people throughout the United States. There were no pins in the land between the lakes area. This doesn't mean nobody is missing there. It means David hasn't looked into the place, or he hasn't found any reports that he could connect to the site. If you live in the LBL area, or you visited the place, let me know if you've ever seen or heard anything, and I'll mention it on the next couple of shows. You can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. If you enjoyed tonight's show, let your friends know. Tell them what they've been missing. And don't forget to check out the Sasquatch Coffee Company. You can find them at squatchcoffee.com. That's Sasquatch without the first S-A. And if you're in the mind of buying some coffee, check out organicmancoffeetrike.shop as well. Yes, I order lots of coffee. I drink lots of coffee. In fact, right now I'm wearing a t-shirt that says that coffee is the gasoline of life. I have about 20 t-shirts that announce various types of coffee companies. If you enjoyed tonight's show, like I said, let your friends know. If not, well, keep it to yourself. Till next time, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?